Howdy, all. It's St. Patty's Day, as you can tell by the side of my Maple Leafs St. Patty's Day hat, which Russ, when I wanted to get a few. This is a few years old. I wanted to get a Toronto St. Patrick's hat. They had, when they came out. And this is a while back when they came out with the Toronto St. Patrick's jersey. I think it was 2001, 2002. It was during the Sundin era, and they wore the jersey in a few games. I wanted to get enough paraphernalia because I figured, it'd be perfect to wear for St. Patty's Day or whatever. And I could not find a Toronto St. Patrick's hat. They just had this with the Leafs emblem on it, which was bizarre.
Yeah, it is a little bizarre. I mean, but look, everybody does some sort of St. Patty's something. It's fun if you like green. It's my dad's birthday, right? So I always have a special fondness for it, even though I'm a Jewish guy, because it's my dad. My dad's name is actually Danny too, so it's kind of funny. So he, he's not your prototypical Irish guy, obviously, but he is Danny boy on St. Patrick's Day. So I have that going for him.
Well, it's like somebody actually Irishized my name. Of course, my name is Augelo with A-U-G, but they did it O''Jello. It's like
there you go. I like that.
Yeah, there you go. But in Buffalo, there is a St. Patrick's Day parade. It's downtown Buffalo. Charles Schumer, the senator from New York, always marches in the St. Patrick's Day parade, and I always yell for him to resign every time he walks by.
People know him as Chuck Schumer. I don't know if they know him as Charles.
Well, I'm being formal. What can I say?
Yeah,
but the one thing I don't understand, I like a beer every once in a while. I'm very particular about the type of beer that I drink. Green beer, I could never do it. I really don't want to drink a beer with like green-colored carcinogens in it.
It gives you the trots. Let's be real.
I mean, it's like Mike Babcock at his press conference after the morning skate today. The first thing that came out of his mouth, he basically said to the press corps, make sure you don't drink any green beer until after the game. I'm like. If it's a Guinness or if it's a nice Irish stout or something like that, fine.
Yeah, I appreciate a good Irish beer. I've been to Ireland. To be honest, I like Murphy's better than I like Guinness.
Really?
Yeah, I like the Guinness Blonde stuff's pretty good. I think that's good. I'm not a big dark beer guy, but when I was there, I tried them both, and I actually liked Murphy's better. And what was even more interesting, though, is the Heineken there. Because they, where we were in Ireland, they had like this old Heineken factory that they basically saved, and it's one of the oldest breweries they say in Europe. And that Heineken there was 1,000 times better than the Heineken here. It wasn't even close. So I found myself drinking Heineken again there because it just tasted so much better.
Well, it's funny because Guinness is one of the few beers that I do like, but it's bitter when it doesn't have the thick head on it. So I have to drink it down quickly because once that head disappears and it's just the actual Guinness, it's almost like the head of the beer filters out the impurities. That's what I always used to say. It's not impurities; it just filters out the bitterness. But once it sort of gets a little lukewarm and the head is gone, I can't drink it. So it's like
it gets a little weak that way. The thing that was weird about the Murphys, I don't know if you've ever had one. There are some outlets that have them now, like they're carrying them in the cans, but it has a mixing ball in the can.
Yeah. No. I'm pretty sure it was. I don't know if it was the bottle or the can of Guinness back in the day. You used to shake it and you could hear the ball going back and forth. I think it was the can. I'm pretty sure it was the can.
And what is that supposed to do? Is that supposed to eliminate the head? That's my guess.
I don't know.
My guess is it's to eliminate the foam, but I don't know.
I'm sure somebody who's watching knows, and they can tell us in the chat. I'll tell you one thing though, and the final thing, like I said, Sunday. It's weird because usually in Buffalo, the St. Patty's Day parade, it's the Sunday closest to St. Patrick's Day. Usually, it's before the actual day. Most it's sort of half and half most of the time. This time it's on the first Sunday after, so it's on the 20th. So it's like it's 3 days after St. Patrick's Day, and it's essentially, and for anybody in Buffalo, they know this. The downtown parade is essentially drunk and debauchery down Delaware Avenue. It's
the same way in every city. It's kind of weird that it's sort of like a drinking, holiday day, because I can't think of one that's in the Jewish religion that it's just like, hey, let's just go out to the bar and drink, So it's kind of different in that way.
Yeah. Yeah, and corned beef and cabbage. Ugh.
Oh, cabbage. If you cook cabbage in my house, I run for the hills. My mother used to cook cabbage. That would be the one way she could clear us out of the house.
Cabbage, coleslaw, bye. No, can't do it. Anyway, let's talk hockey.
All right.
Hello, Hockey Roll. Today is Thursday, March 17th, 2016.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
And I'm Michael Agello, and this is the Hockeybuzzcast here on HockeyBuzz.com. Eklund will be back tomorrow. I think Russ won't.
I won't.
We'll probably have Ty Anderson and a slew of guests here on the Hockeybuzzcast. Russ, let's talk about some of the games last night. First and most importantly, the Philadelphia Flyers go into the United Center in Chicago and pull out a 3-2 victory and move ahead of the Detroit Red Wings into the last wild card spot in the Eastern Conference. I know that you're not sold yet on the Flyers, and I agree with the reasons, but from what I've been looking at the Wings, I think the Wings, they have a lot of talent, but I think the Wings are falling apart right now.
I think they're going through a phase where they're falling apart, but there's still 12 games left.
Sure.
Like the Flyers are 8-1-1 in their last 10. Basically, a couple weeks ago on TV, I said I think they'd have to do something crazy, like 26-5 or whatever. And at the end of the day, it's going to turn out to be something crazy to get in, because even with 8-1-1, they're only 1 point in. Things are going their way lately. They're getting the bounces. Certainly on that Gudis goal, they got the bounces, at least 4 of them. And but they played great. To go into the United Center and win is huge. Even with Darling in net, it's huge. That's a big deal. That was a hotly contested game. You knew that the Blackhawks were going to play close to the vest with Darling in there. And you know what? The Flyers took it to them, and I give them credit for that. The thing that I would worry about is when the steam of the city, like a lot of the media and fans, are all sort of behind Shane Gostisbehere, but I hope he doesn't feel the pressure, because, again, he's never played this many games in his career, and for a kid to have to be almost carrying a team, because that's the way everybody feels the way it's going right now, because he's had so many game-winning goals, that's a tough thing to do down the stretch. It really is.
Yeah, I'm sure Detroit was not happy with the fact that Chicago started Scott Darling over Corey Crawford, but that's their prerogative.
No, Crawford had an upper body.
Oh, yeah, an upper body. Okay, I didn't even know about that. So, well, and if they have one little ding right now, in the 3 weeks before the playoffs, they're going to err on the side of caution and sit these players.
Well, Mrazek's sitting for just that reason. He's got a cold, so Jimmy Howard's going to be in there against Columbus.
And Neuwirth did last weekend. You were saying that he was sick. So, but to your Gostisbehere point, I told you when we talked before the show, I've playfully referred to Gostisbehere as Gosta Jesus because of the reaction of Philadelphia fans and the media to him. And this was when he just came up. This is when he was scoring a few goals and starting to open people's eyes. Mm-hmm. Now we're talking about him as a Calder Trophy, potential Calder Trophy nominee, and the guy who's the centerpiece of this surge. He's being treated in a way like Andrew Hammond was last year.
Yeah, no question. But the one thing that I do caution people, and Andrew Hammond's a great example, and Ron Hextall, when he was a rookie, what he did, you could control more when you're a goalie. Like, you could have a bigger impact as a goalie than you can as any other player on the ice. And so that's the other thing. It's hard for just one great rookie to propel them. Now, a lot of other things are going well for the Flyers. Andrew McDonald right now, this moment's playing well. Is he going to continue? I don't know, because he couldn't do it at the beginning of the year, but now all of a sudden he's doing it. That's been a big boost for them, too. I've given Dave Haxtell a lot of credit, obviously. I think I said yesterday on the show. If not, I'll repeat it. But that basically he's working Shane Gostisbehere like Herb Brooks worked Brian Leetch. And he's letting him do everything he needs to do offensively, let him jump into the play, but also play some defense, but really just sort of springing him loose at the right times. And that's really worked out well for them because, again, going into next year, And I've seen this happen many times when there's a great rookie defenseman. Phaneuf is one of them because he had all those game-winning goals. He has the record 17, I think it is, as a rookie.
Yeah.
The idea is when you go into your second year after being that great offensive rookie defenseman, and Leach had to go through this too, there will be a crackdown on how much more defense he'll have to play next year as a top pairing D-man if he wants to keep that top pairing D-man spot. That's the difference, and that's where sometimes you get into that rookie hiccup, the second-year hiccup, rather, because of that.
And he's got 15 goals, and I think it's now 60 games. I mean, he didn't come up until, what, early November? I mean, he wasn't there in the first month.
Actually, more than that. I think it was a little later than that. Actually,
around Veterans Day, maybe, something like that?
No, I think it was even later than that. It was right around that spot. The thing was, and this is a misnomer, and I heard it being talked about, it wasn't that the Flyers weren't interested in bringing him up or wanted him to play a certain amount of games down there, even though that's Ron Hextall's persona.
Right.
They were cap strapped. They couldn't bring up anybody. Until they made the LeCavier deal, they couldn't bring him up. So whatever day they made the LeCavier deal, that's when Shane Gostisbehere started playing.
Okay. I thought LeCavier's deal was made in January, and I know he's played more games than that. I know they did some maneuver to be able to bring him up. I can't remember what it was. I'll find out.
Yeah, I can't remember exactly, and it probably. But once Vinny moved out, then they were able to move guys around regularly, and that was a big deal.
Now, and we talked about this as well. Voracek is probably coming back on Saturday. Yep. And this is a guy who, I mean, last year was one of their leading scorers and had a phenomenal year and got signed to that long-term deal, making over $8 million. This year he started off really, really slow, seemed to start to get into the Hackstall swing of things just before he got injured, and now, I mean, everything is going right now. I always come back to this analogy, but I remember when the Maple Leafs were in the playoffs, long time ago, because I've been in the playoffs that many times. But when they were in 2002, when they had all these injuries and Alan McCauley was their number one center and Gary Roberts put the team on their back, and they were playing Carolina in the Eastern Conference Final, and Game 1, I believe they won, and they decided to bring back everybody, Sundin, Tucker, Jurke Lume, all these guys at the same time, and they never recovered. I think they lost 3 of the next 4 and then lost in 6 games. You don't want to mess a lineup that's working, but it's Voracek, so I would think that they would bring him back, and I would think they would probably insert him where he was before the injury, but who knows? What do you think?
It was November 14th that Gostisbehere first came up.
Okay.
And then the other kids all came up with the Vinny thing. That's where I was getting that confused because nobody else was able to move for them because they were just capped out. And so that really helped create the team that they're at now. As far as, the other stuff, yeah, I mean, what you're talking about with the Leafs back then, I guess it's a different world. Let's just say that. I think we can't go back and look at what happened before as to what might happen now, right? I think that's the safe way of putting it. Things have changed, and I think things have changed drastically because of the cap.
Yeah. I believe Detroit plays tonight against Columbus, so we'll talk about that in a few minutes, but that'll be a key matchup for the Red Wings in that battle for the last wild card spot. I mean, Pittsburgh is not out of the woods right now. They still have 3 games against Philadelphia, but like we said yesterday, I think if Pittsburgh wins one of those games, I think they're okay. They're only 3 points up, or 2 points up right now, but they're 3 points up on Detroit. So, Pittsburgh's going to be an interested party in the Columbus game. They'll be rooting for Sergei Bobrovsky to be able to actually stop a puck tonight.
Those games will have a lot of tension to the Pittsburgh-Philly games.
Yeah.
Even if Pittsburgh feels like they're safe, they don't let up against Philly, and Philly doesn't let up against them. So those would be tough games. Even without Malkin, I think all those games are going to be very close. It'll be interesting to see who the Flyers use in net because Mason has been known to be very good against Pittsburgh, and Neuvirth doesn't have a real track record against Pittsburgh, not the last couple of seasons anyhow. So it'll be interesting to see who they use for that. If I were the coach, I would go with Mason simply because he's been good against this group, and until proven otherwise, that might be the way to go. But we'll see. I mean, it seems like right now Neuwirth is the goalie of favor for this moment. It could last 3, 4, 5 games. It could last the rest of the season. It could go right through to the playoffs. I mean, we don't really know, and really everybody in town doesn't have a great feel for that because it's gone back and forth for most of the year.
Yeah,
Different times, you know.
the standings for the Eastern Conference right now, Pittsburgh's at 82 points with 69 games played. Philadelphia at 80 with 69 games played. Detroit with 79 with 70 games played. So Pittsburgh and Philadelphia both have a game in hand on Detroit. If Detroit loses to Columbus right now, not to say they're out of it, because they'd only be two. Pittsburgh and Philadelphia would both have 2 games in hand, but they would be not in an enviable position to be behind and have 2 games in hand. So
no, they'll be very desperate for that game. Look, Columbus will play hard. Bobrovsky is this his first game back, or has he been back for a game?
He was back, and I think he took the loss in his first game.
Yeah. So, he'll be a little less shaky probably in this one. It'll be a tough game, but again, I don't think Detroit played a horrible game against the Flyers. They just had a horrible first period and then had to dig themselves out, and they almost dug themselves out. They didn't, but they almost did. And so I think that's the important thing to look at. Everybody's sort of treating that game like they lost 4-1. They lost 4-3.
Right.
And, so there is that.
The other big game, I guess, in terms of teams that have had some playoff pedigree, was the Rangers at Anaheim last night. Rangers come out with a 2-1 victory over the Ducks. The Ducks have been the hottest team in the league since I'd say probably early January. I mean, when they were one of the worst teams in the league, and then all of a sudden they just turned it on. If you look at the standings now, I mean, and not to say that I think the Rangers are a lock, but I think they're pretty close to it. But I think they're a lock for making the playoffs. They're not a lock for finishing second or third. They could fall into a wild card spot if Pittsburgh or Philadelphia just continue to charge and play at the rate that they're playing. But I can't see, with 12 games left, the Rangers falling out when they have 87 points. They
won't fall out. It's just a matter of seeding. You're right. But I'll tell you, if you ask me who the team MVP is, it's Kevin Klein. Kevin Klein, when he originally broke his thumb, everybody said it was going to be like 4 weeks. The next day, he laughed at that. And I know Kevin Klein a little bit. I did a book signing with him, got to know him. I think he's a great guy. But he's a tough hockey player. At the end of the day, he has a lot of pride. Remember I told you the story about when he was drafted? He was in the 2003 draft, but we don't talk about Kevin Klein being in that draft. We talk about Eric Stahl and his teammate now and a lot of other guys, right? And, Dustin Brown and so on. But the thing is, this guy has been playing tremendous since the broken thumb, and offensively he's kicked in goals, and he had both goals yesterday. It was a tremendous game for him. At the end of the game, it was a little worrisome because Ryan McDonagh took a puck to the face, went under the mask, and looked like some blood came out. And that was when time was expiring. And boy, he's just gotten beaten up again this season.
Yeah, he's a magnet for this kind of stuff. I mean, he's just soaked up so much pain this year. It's ridiculous.
He's tough as nails, but at some point you do kind of wonder, like last year, it definitely took its toll with his foot, because I was at that Game 7 in Tampa. We all watched him get out on the ice and sort of test out the foot, and he played, but he wasn't Ryan McDonagh, and they needed Ryan McDonagh to get past Tampa. Playoffs haven't even started yet.
Yeah, it's funny, though, in regards to Klein, because Klein has had a pretty good year, and he's been a pretty solid guy since they picked him up from, I believe it was Nashville.
Yes.
His contract, the contract extension that he signed,
it's a bargain.
As much of a terrible contract, the one to Girardi, or you can even say maybe the one to Stahl is that they were.
Stahl's not his fault because of the eye injury. Like, he's come back as well as you can come back. The Girardi contract is a bad contract.
But the Klein contract sort of counterbalances that, because the combination, they can get away with Girardi because they have Klein. Now, if they can, would I expect Girardi to be one of the 3 defensemen, or one of the few defensemen that they leave exposed on the?
Well, but the problem is he's got one of the most restrictive contracts in the league, so it'll depend upon what happens in that big discussion that they have.
Well, I want to discuss this in a minute after we get through the games, because one of the things with expansion I have a theory on, but let's just finish out the games. The other one with playoff implications was Colorado playing Vancouver. The Avalanche went 3-1. I mean, the Avalanche right now are tied into a pretty tight battle with the with the Minnesota Wild for the last wild card spot in the West. Now, Colorado has 76, Minnesota has 75. Minnesota has the game in hand. Colorado, I mean, again, Russ, I've been about, they did add a guy like Eric Jelena at the deadline to maybe help him a little bit on the blue line, but I continue to say that blue line is their weak spot, and I just don't know whether it's going to cost them a playoff spot or not.
It's definitely their weak spot. It could cost them a playoff spot, but they're playing hard. They've got young legs, and if I had to say who's going to make it, Minnesota or them, I think they could edge out Minnesota simply because of the young legs. Because let's face it, we looked at the Minnesota contracts, and they've got some guys that, unless they do something down the stretch, by next year, they're going to have one of the worst cap situations in the league.
Yeah,
for the amount of production that they're spending dollars on. It's horrible.
Yeah, I mean, okay, Zach Parise is not over the hill.
No.
But Zach Parise is not the player that he was, say, 3 years ago, 4 years ago when the Devils made the finals. He's making 7.5 for like another 7 years, 8 years, something like that. I mean, Ryan Suter's making them the same amount of money, I believe the same amount of term. And for Suter, even though his offensive numbers may decline over the next couple of years, that's not bad because for a defenseman who plays 30 minutes a night,
you pay it. Who cares?
But for Parise, if he's not scoring 25 to 30 goals, that contract is an anchor around their neck.
And Vanek. I mean, let's not give Tomek Vanek a pass either.
Yeah, but the one benefit is that Vanek took a 3-year deal when he signed there. He took big money but shorter term.
Yeah.
I would say to you that after next year, because I think he has one more year at $6.5 million. He's either going to retire or he'll take a contract and like a 1-year extension at $2 million with a no move clause to stay in Minnesota. But he's, that contract is clearly not worth it for the production that he's putting up. But yeah, I mean, there's a team. I mean, Chuck Fletcher has not taken a lot of heat. All the heat was on Mike Yeo for a number of years.
It was.
And now I think when you look at their structure, you have to start looking at Fletcher and say, okay, look at all the decisions he's made. Look at all the big contracts. Look at everybody that's locked up. And I think we figured it out. I think it was like $25 million locked up in 4 forwards in Koivu, Vanek, Parise, and Jason Pominville. And the young guys now, they got Coyle locked up for a while. I think Granlund signed an extension, and they're under lower contracts. But when they come up, they're not going to have any room to sign them.
No, they're in trouble. And it's funny, they got out of the Backstrom thing too, and they're still in trouble.
And as I pointed out to you, they have Matthew Dumba as an RFA coming up this summer, and they have Spurgeon's new contract kicking in at. To me, you look at that situation and you base it on some of the rumors that are out there. I'm pretty sure they're gonna probably unload Jonas Brodin, and even though I don't think he's a defenseman that you want to unload, but it's somebody that you can move, maybe get younger and more cheaper assets, and you still have Dumba and Spurgeon and Scandella and Suter. You maybe can afford to get rid of Brodin.
Yeah, I think they can. I mean, I think with Dumba's move into the starting lineup and staying there now and showing offense. I think so. I think Dumba's had a heck of a year, and I know people were worried about him before he was drafted because he showed all the offense. He showed the great ability for open ice hits, which he still does, but he didn't show great defensive ability, and that's started to come around now. And he's a much better defenseman, but yet he still has explosive speed and still has the offense. And the offense is starting to kick in. He's got 24 points, something like that. I could see him going up another 10 points next year after whatever the total is for this year. So I'm really happy with him. And I think, you're right. I think they can make an upgrade there in offense by trading a defenseman. I think that's something you might see at the draft. That would make most sense because maybe even picks get swapped or something. I could see that happening.
In the Tank Nation update, the Buffalo Sabres got a point last night in an overtime loss to the Canadiens. I don't know if you saw any of this game, Russ, but you would have been pleased to see your favorite player, Evander Kane, in the third period, like midway through the third period, take a double minor. He took it was a 2-minute penalty for cross-checking. He was either Torrey Mitchell or Paul Byron. It was Paul Byron. And he mouthed off at the officials and got the extra 2. And if it wasn't for some pretty good penalty killing by the Sabres, that would have been a death blow for them. Then they came back. Marcus Foligno tied the game, and Montreal won it in overtime. But from a guy, this is a team that's strewn with 18 and 19-year-olds, and you would expect that lack of discipline out of them, but not out of a guy who's I don't know if he's supposed to be a leader, but he's supposed to be old enough to know what not to do in certain situations.
I mean, again, when you're making over $5 million and you are playing on a team with mostly kids, you are expected to be a leader.
Yeah.
And he's not. And he hasn't matured. And that's what worries me about Evander Kane, because he has all the hockey tools. We know it. But upstairs, that's the problem. And I would have to think that Tim Murray is very upset with his production this year. He'll never say it publicly, but there's no way he could be happy with it. There's no way.
Well, he might try to explore trading him, but I mean, based on the stuff that eventually he was cleared of, that situation, and then the situation previously in Winnipeg. I mean, there's a lot of black marks on this record, a lot of question marks, and he's only under contract, I think, another 2 years at $5.25 million, and he's got a lot of talent, but this is strike 2 on his record in Buffalo. I don't know how many GMs are going to be willing to take a chance on him, at least not to give up significant prospects or players to get him.
Somebody will if they were to trade him. If I were Buffalo, I would trade him, only because I know what's coming. And by the time it's there, why am I even paying this guy? I would rather have a solid citizen who could score right around the same amount or a little less, and I won't have to worry about him. I don't have to worry about reading about him in the paper. And I want my kids to learn from him. And I'm sure there's some good things that Kane's doing with young players, but the problem is there's a lot of bad things too. Right. And that mouthing off at the official is a mark of his career. He's done that his whole career.
Yeah. The other couple games, the Flames beat Winnipeg. The Flames are now 6 points ahead of the last place Maple Leafs. The Edmonton Oilers, oh my goodness. They win a game. After a 6-game home losing streak, they beat the St. Louis Blues 6-4. They're 4 points above the Maple Leafs, but the Leafs.
Who was in net for that one?
It was Talbot. Yeah. But and Ryan Nugent.
Talbot gave up 4.
Yeah, Ryan Nugent Hopkins had 2 goals. Let's flip the page here, because there's nothing really to talk about with the Oilers other than the fact that with all that talent in the world, they're just
would be a broken record. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. The Blues. Jake Allen got lit up in Calgary.
Yeah.
I believe they had to yank him and put in Anders Nilsson.
Yeah.
Jake Allen now gets lit up against Edmonton. This is a team.
Elliott's out for the year, right?
Who's that?
Is Elliott out for the year?
I think so. I
think so too. And this is, like I said, this is Ken Hitchcock's nightmare now, because now he has no fallback. Nielsen is not a fallback. If they use Nielsen in the playoffs, it's like waving the white flag.
No, I'm not laying it all on Jake Allen. I mean, you're talking about a team.
No, I'm not either, but no option to switch to.
Right, but exactly. And the thing is, their defense. I mean, Peter Angelo and Shattenkirk, and they're just not playing well right now. Now I know they have a playoff spot locked up. They're in this battle with Dallas and Chicago for first place in the Central. I mean, I'm sure they can't wait for the playoffs to get here, because these games essentially it's trying to not get hurt and just trying to get ready for the postseason that you've been looking forward to, but. You're talking about 2 of the worst teams in the league, and they got lit up by them, both times. So I think Hitchcock has to be concerned.
Yeah, I got to tell you, I'm early in the season. I got interviewed by a Russian radio station, and they asked me about the NFL, right? And so they said, "Who's the most disappointing team? Who will be the most disappointing team?" And I said the Atlanta Falcons. And in typical Atlanta Falcons fashion, they came out of the gate quick, and they finished badly. And, the St. Louis Blues are sort of turning into that kind of team. And they have all the talent in the world. They do. Teams would kill for their defense. Do they have the best goaltending? No. Do they have horrible goaltending? No. They had decent offense. They've been banged up. But when is it going to gel for them? I mean, we just don't see the gelling. And they have to gel late, because in the West, you can't go into the playoffs without any momentum.
Well, here's a good question. We know that there's going to be a big mix-up in Edmonton over the summer. They're more than likely they're going to move a couple of these high pick guys. I would think Eberle, Yakupov, maybe Nugent Hopkins
Yeah.
for the right type of deal. Who's going to make a bigger splash over the summer? The Oilers or the Blues? Because if the Blues lose in the first round, I mean, Hitchcock is gone. You've got Shattenkirk.
Again, we can't say that yet.
Well,
we've been going year to year with them, and I just sort of gave you a framework where it may not be his fault, but they might have to switch goaltending. Right. They might have to say, hey, Jake Allen, we're bringing in someone else to push you, and we'll see who the starter is. Like a backup quarterback in the NFL, they may have to do that.
Yeah, I mean, they could go to Cam Ward, Cam Ward's going to be out there as a UFA. I mean, maybe they can get him on the cheap.
Yeah.
But even if they do keep Hitchcock, you're potentially losing Backus as a UFA. Shattenkirk is 1 year away from being a UFA. You've got a team that has underachieved year after year after year in a division, that's not getting any worse. I mean, Chicago's not going anywhere. Dallas is gaining in strength. Eventually, a team like maybe Winnipeg will come of age. I would think Doug Armstrong. I've heard reports that Doug Armstrong's job might be in jeopardy.
I don't think so.
I don't particularly. That was the first I've heard of it, but it was in the last week or so. They're saying if they're going to make the playoffs, but if they lose out again, really.
We heard those same reports out of San Jose, and pretty much like I said, there was never a worry about San Jose as far as the GM. And I think St. Louis, it's the same thing. He's entrenched there. I don't think they're just going to off this season, even if it's a horrible end to the season. I don't think he's going anywhere. So, but I think they could make a big splash. I do. They do have some youngsters that maybe could challenge for the roster, but they're going to have to shake this up because, look, let's face it, the Stastny signing I wasn't in love with, and they're not getting the return they hoped for. He's still a useful player. He wins faceoffs. He plays defense, but he's not scoring like he should. Now, on the other hand, Alex Steen is playing way better than probably anybody ever imagined.
Right.
Having a career year. Jaden Schwartz staying healthy, he'd be great. Fabry next year could be even better. So there's still a lot of pluses to them, and maybe they let Jordan Binnington be the guy to push Jake Allen, or they get a veteran. Either way, they're going to have to do something to sort of change it a little bit, and Backus seems like the easiest way to do that. I like the guy. He has actually an animal shelter in St. Louis, so I have a real soft spot for him. He and his wife run it, and he does it with his own money, and he does a great job. All that said, you still got to put up the points in hockey, and if you're not doing that in the playoffs, if Backus doesn't have a good playoffs, I think they're going to look at him, and I think they will look to move him. Now, is he a UFA, or has he got one more year?
He's a UFA.
Because they would have to trade his rights, and I think somebody would take the rights to him to negotiate with him because he still could be a difference maker on a team. It's just he has to be on a team where he's not like one of the main guys. He has to be a supporting cast guy. He's
a quality number 2 center, but yeah. they have the same problem that the Buffalo Sabres had in 06 and 07. They have 3 number 2 centers. They don't have a number 1. If they were in on Ryan Johansson to make him the number 1 center, and maybe they fell short. I don't know if they were in it or not. But the reason that if they were in it, is because Stastny is a number 2, Laterra is a number 2, Backus is a number 2. If they put him at center, sometimes they put him at the wing. You've got a superstar in Tarasenko. You've got a really good young player in Jaden Schwartz. Fabry looks like he's going to be a pretty good scoring forward, but up the middle, you just have good players, but you don't have a rock star, and they need that rock star, but to compete with Taves and to compete with Sagan, and they just don't have it. And I don't know if they can get that.
Yeah, next year Barbashev will turn 21. Right now in his first AHL season, he's got 25 points in 52 games. He's probably in the middle of being ready, but he certainly can't play top line. But you never know. They might look at him in camp, and maybe he comes in really strong. He's really fast. He does like to hit. Maybe there's something with him and Tarasenko. Maybe you do try and bring him in and try and work some magic there. It's possible. They're going to have to do something because at some point, if they don't pick up high-priced free agents, they're going to have some of their kids come through offensively. That's really where they've been getting hurt offensively is, they got great results out of Jaden Schwartz, no question, and Fabry, terrific. They need somebody else. Jordan Schmaltz, they haven't traded him yet, so maybe he'll even add offense from the blue line. That's something where I could see that possibly happening too, especially if they move Shattenkirk or do something like that.
Yeah.
So these are things that could happen, and at least there's a little bit of hope there. But they've got to do something. I mean, they really do.
Well, I mean, they have Peter Angelo and Bouwmeester locked up long term. Pareko is in the first year of his entry level, so that's a savings for them. And they just re-signed Carl Gunnarsson with a no-trade clause, not for a ton of money, but the fact that they locked him up for 3 more years when he was a UFA has to be a signal that they're going to move Shattenkirk, because I don't think they would have done that if they were going to keep Shattenkirk around.
And that's why Schmaltz will probably be the guy that gets the long look. The interesting thing is, like, this year, Backus has 39 points.
Yeah.
And that's his lowest total in 4 years. Even his PIMs are down to 77. So there's definitely a decline. He's going to get 20 goals again, and he's basically been a guy that gets between 15 and 20 his whole career. But, right now we're talking about a 31-year-old guy, and he's sort of at a crossroads. Like, you're never going to see the best of him again. You might see a little bit more of an arc and then down and then arc and down. That's what happens when players get to be over 31 in this league. I think that's the important thing is, and I can't stress this enough, in this league now, 31 is starting to get old. It doesn't matter that Jaromir Jagr is playing. It's just for the average player, once they hit that age now, they're getting old because of the speed of the game. Jagr's being able to keep up. That's an amazing thing, but most guys aren't going to be able to do that. And you're seeing it. You're seeing some guys, even like Eric Stahl. He did get a point last night, but he's not the same guy. If this league were a little slower, he'd be a lot better.
Yeah, and if you think about the situation with Shattenkirk, a team like Edmonton would love to get Shattenkirk, and they would probably trade one of those high draft pick guys to get him. But he's only under contract for another year, and if he doesn't want to go to Edmonton, then they can't trade a Nugent Hopkins or a Yakupov or a Eberle to St. Louis, an asset that they can hold on to for a few years. They can't trade him for a guy who's one and done. So they're gonna have to trade Shattenkirk someplace to get value for him that he wants to go to, that he will sign an extension with.
Yeah, next year there'll be some pressure. The Winter Classic's going to be in St. Louis, so I think more eyes around the country will be on St. Louis more than ever before. Because when you're in a game like that, there's a lot more coverage. A lot more people come and who haven't ever covered you before, and will start sort of looking into your team. And so I think next year is a big year for them. If they fall short this year, they are going to have to do some sort of reboot.
Yeah. Let's talk about what we were talking about expansion. I mean, there's going to be we don't know for
expanding.
Sure.
Are you sure?
Yeah. I was going to say we don't know for sure, but the indications are it's going to be Vegas.
Yeah.
The indications are it'll be announced. It'll be the big splash in between the final and the draft. There'll be something at the NHL awards, which will be in Vegas.
Mm-hmm.
They'll announce it. That'll be perfect. It'll just So
I'll have a big jersey come down from the ceiling with lights and sparklers, and no, they won't do it that way. But I'm just kidding.
Yes, but it seems set up for that. I don't know what's going to happen with Quebec. I know Eck posted something about they may get a team within 3 years. I still think they're the more likely opportunity there is them to get a transfer team. Carolina.
Yeah, I think that's what's going to happen.
But the chicanery and the machinations that are going to happen if they announce and there's one team. I told you this yesterday. I think there will be a number of trades made. I mean, teams will react because they'll try to put their house in order. But also, I think you're going to have teams trading draft picks to this Las Vegas franchise. Making little deals like, we'll give you a second-round pick if you take Andrew McDonald.
Mm-hmm.
We'll give you a second-round pick if you take Dan Girardi.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? I can
see that.
It benefits them because they're going to have to reach the cap floor, so they're not going to take a ton of cheap players.
Right.
They're going to have salaried players, and they're probably going to want character guys who still have something left in the tank because they don't want to be a team that's just walked over. And in the West,
I think it's going to be a little different. I think rather than a Girardi, and again I pointed out his contract problems, but I think rather than a Girardi, they're going to look for marquee names. So maybe they would take a Rick Nash, because you need to market a big-time scorer or a guy who used to be a big-time scorer. It's hard to market a stay-at-home defenseman.
Yeah, well, Rick Nash would have 1 year left in a contract at almost $8 million, and as an asset, that expansion franchise can flip him at the deadline and
Yep.
retain salary. So yeah, that's an
To me,
and
that's a name where I think the Rangers would have to explore.
one of the things I pointed out in my article that I wrote yesterday. NHL teams, this 20 now, none of this has been etched in stone. They haven't completely, set the rules. But
That's why I said the other day on Twitter, 75%, because we don't know what happens if something happens with the economy between now and June. They might say we're going to wait another year. That's entirely possible.
Sure. But the Canadian dollar is actually starting to get stronger, starting to come back a little bit. So, but the with the 25% payroll mark that these teams have to reach.
Yes.
They have to expose players that equal 25% of their payroll. First of all, you could have teams that would keep their payroll down low. If that was a challenge. We don't know whether guys who are expiring contracts will count against that 25%. I would think not, because they're UFAs. So the teams that are Las Vegas is not going to draft a UFA that in late June when he's a free agent July 1st. But a team like Toronto, with a guy like Joffrey Lupul, who's got 2 years left on his contract, making $5.25 million.
Has anybody seen Joffrey Lupul lately?
No. I think he's vacationing with Stefan Robidas. Okay. So Joffrey Lupul had stomach sports hernia surgery that ended his year. He's supposed to be back 100% healthy for next year. But there's been talk, that they were going to buy him out, or they were going to say, enjoy your 2 years in California and see you later. But now with this 25% of payroll thing, his salary would equal about 20% of that $25 million.
Yeah.
So that 25%.
Yeah.
So they keep him around, and other teams will keep players with salary around just to qualify for that limitation. I think that's a big possibility. I think you're going to have some teams. Normally I think if the Leafs if all things were being equal and there wasn't an expansion situation, I think he would either be traded or he would be buried or they would buy him out. But because of this, and because they've already cleared out Clarkson and Kessel and Phaneuf, if they didn't have Lupul around, they would have to expose, a JVR or somebody with a big contract. So I think
it's possible.
Yeah, I think Lupul's going to be safe. But the other thing is, and I wanted to ask you about this because it's in both scenarios, it's the one goaltender, one.
Right.
And for teams like
it's only one player per team.
Yeah, it's one player per team, right.
So that's the important thing. So while we're talking about setting all these things up, you're really only setting it up to lose one player.
Okay, so who does – and we don't know if Jim Rutherford's going to be the GM next year, but –
we're going to say no.
We'll say no, and we'll say it's whoever his assistant GM is, which I'm drawing a blank. Who do you protect? Marc-Andre Fleury or Matt Murray?
Nope, Matt Murray.
Yep.
If you want Marc-Andre Fleury in his contract, take him.
And there's Las Vegas's goaltender. I would be shocked if Marc-Andre Fleury was exposed that they wouldn't take him.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if they would. It depends. I guess they would because they at least can market him. So I guess they would. But, I think Pittsburgh, you'd have to sort of leave him exposed. But that's the best case scenario for him. That is. That's the best case scenario for Las Vegas, that they get a guy like that. Although getting a guy like Murray, you can make the argument it's better long term.
Oh, but the thing is, they would have. They can't protect two goaltenders. If they protect Murray, Jerry, who they might think is as good a prospect or better, he's on his second. After next year, he'll be on his second year pro. He will have to be protected.
Yeah, but they will. Again, they're going to protect Murray. I don't think they'll protect either of the other two, right. And I think they'll let it ride. And, again, there's no guarantee they're going to want to take on Fleury's contract. They're going to look at it and say, how many more years do we think he has? I forget how many years he has on his deal.
I think he has 3 years left.
Yeah, so I mean that's that's something to consider. It is. So you're getting a name, and you're getting a guy who's really playing well now. We don't know what he's going to be like 3 years from now. So it'll be interesting. I give you the other one too that we were talking about yesterday, and this is one probably organizations have a few guys like this. So Pavel Buchnevich for the Rangers is unsigned, and he was a 2013 draft pick.
Right.
And so, like you were telling me, they've got to get him signed because if not, he will be unprotected.
Right.
And so would a team like Las Vegas, if Buchnevich decides to not sign with the Rangers next year, would they roll the dice and get a kid like this who could be a cornerstone of a franchise, but then you don't know when he'd come over and there's no guarantee he'd sign for you?
Right.
Would you waste a pick on that?
Yeah. And like, I mean,
it's a tough call, right?
It is. It's a very tough call. I mean, in the Toronto situation, they drafted 3 or 4 kids in the 2014 draft that are all college players. So they will be exposed unless they sign, but most of these kids are not coming out of college in their sophomore or junior years.
Right.
So they're going to be exposed.
Right.
The one guy who has played very well in the Swedish league for the last 3 years, Andreas Janssen, he was the SHL Rookie of the Year. He signed last summer. He's coming over this summer.
He's safe.
He's safe because he's only going to be in his first year. So they protected him. But
there's a shell game with this. There is.
I mean, the Leafs. Would they cry if they lost? Like one of their veteran forward guys that they didn't trade. Would they cry if they lost Tyler Bozak or Nazem Kadri?
They're not going to lose a ton. The Leafs. They're not.
Yeah, the Leafs are going to protect the kids. They won't have to protect Marner, but they're going to protect Nylander and Connor Brown and Kapanen and Van Riemsdyk, and they'll protect those guys. They're not going to protect guys who maybe they don't have a lot of connection to. So
here's the thing: if I'm a GM of Las Vegas, I'm probably going to leave Marc-Andre Fleury alone, and I'll tell you why. He's not going to have much defense in front of him. And so now I'm going to get a 30-something-year-old goalie who I'm going to pay a lot of money to the next 3 years, and it's going to take 3 years or more for me to get some really good defense going. I'd rather have Tristan Jarry or some other young goalie who I think can be a starter in this league who can grow with the defense. I think that's a better opportunity.
But and this is and we've seen this in expansion drafts before. A team that's an didn't Van Beesbrook get picked up and then traded?
I think so.
Yeah, he was picked up in the expansion draft and then flipped.
But flipping Fleury is going to be hard because of the money.
Right, but if there's a team out there that's looking for a goaltender, like say the St. Louis Blues or the Toronto,
what's his dollar figure? Is it 7?
5.5.
5.5. That's still a lot to take for another couple of years, even in the middle of next year.
It is. It's a lot. It is a lot, but I'm just saying for a team that thinks they're missing that one piece, and they think that Fleury at 32 or 33 years old is still got it.
The only difference is back then with Van Beesbrook, there was no cap. Now there's a cap, and I don't think there's any way a new team like Vegas is going to eat money on a deal just to make.
No. They're only doing something like that if they know they've got somebody who can take them. They know what they're getting beforehand.
Right.
When all the available lists are made, there's going to be whoever this GM is going to be for Vegas. They're going to be making their calls. They're going to be getting a lot of phone calls. That's why I'm saying it better be somebody who's got some NHL experience.
Yes.
Handling that job, because there's going to be a lot of iron,
there's a lot to sift through. I mean, to me, the biggest thing, again, I wrote something yesterday on Sportsology. People could check it out about scouting. And it was about the All-American Prospects game, and Paul Holmgren and Jim Johansson, they all talked about scouting. And my whole thing is the scouts on that team and the pro personnel guys are going to be the key guys, because you're going to need to get guys that are familiar with all of the youngsters that are littered around the league that may be exposed, and you're going to have to get somebody who's a pro personnel guy that has seen these guys play within the last year, so they can evaluate their talent too. So there's a lot of scouting to be done.
Yes.
Just in a short amount of time, just to sort of get it together and say, okay, if it were me, if I'm the assistant GM or GM, I would be asking for a list of like the 50 best prospects that you think are out there in case they get exposed, and list them in ranking order. Let's rank these guys. So this way, when the day comes, I could sort of look at the sheet and decide, okay, well, you guys have this guy 5th on the sheet. I think I should take him. You know, that kind of thing. Because the GM's not going to know those players.
No, I'm pretty sure that if they announce,
they can hire me. If Vegas wants to hire me, as an example, call me.
Yeah, me too. The league will let them know way before they announce it, because they're going to have a GM lined up. If that team is announced on June 15th, on June 16th, they're probably naming the general manager, because he's going to have to put together a scouting staff and a coaching staff and all that stuff pretty quickly. And like you said, he's going to have to probably find, I mean, they won't know who is available until after the next season.
No, but you still have to prepare a year ahead of time. Right. You've got to, there's guys like the 1 to 2 year guys you're not worried about. So it's not like you're scouting juniors for these guys, because really you're probably going to be looking at the AHL and overseas. Those are the main ones you're going to be looking at for gems, for guys that aren't going to get signed that are going to be available, and for guys that are maybe in their 3rd year in the AHL that haven't gotten called up. That's what you're going to be looking at.
And nobody has mentioned this, and I haven't heard it, so I'll just put this as an open question before we end the show, and we'll just mention the games that are going on tonight. But an expansion team coming into the league in 2017, will they be given the best chance of winning the lottery? Because they'll be drafting in the 2017 draft.
Right.
You would think that they'd be given the best chance because they're, an expansion.
I would think they would have to make an amendment and say, yes, you get the first pick regardless.
Well, I don't know about them getting the first pick regardless. They'd have to be in the lottery, but they would get the 20%. They would.
I would give them the first pick. I would. I think other GMs would argue with that, but I would give them the first pick, because if you don't give them the first pick, it's going to take 5 to 7 years for that team to be any good. If you just put them in the lottery, and let's say they go, they draw like 4 or 5, they still might not get their franchise player.
No, honestly, right now, the only name I know for the 2017 draft is Nolan Patrick.
Right.
The presumptive number 1 pick, but we're talking a year and a half out from that draft.
He's got 100 points already.
Yeah, but as a 16-year-old, I believe.
And I was bitching when I watched him play not that long ago, if you remember, that he wasn't getting enough power play time, and yet still he's found a way to get 100 points.
Yeah.
I think they really should be awarded the first pick. I do. I don't think that's unfair.
That's going to be interesting. I think they will be given automatically the best chance.
Yeah, I think that goes without saying, but I would go further. I would, because or maybe they're guaranteed to draft no later than 2nd. Right, and that's fine. If it works that way, there's got to be some sort of other component, because like I said, what if they come in 6th or 7th? That's not good.
Well, no. I mean, the lowest with the highest odds, and I of course know this because
it'll be like 1, 2, or 3. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. They'll at the absolute worst they'll get the 4th pick if they have the 20% chance. So that's not bad. But if they amended that to say, okay, if you will be in the lottery, you get the 20% chance. If you lose the lottery, you're not going to get 4th. You're going to get 2nd, and you're locked into either 1 or 2 because you're an expansion team. Then you're giving them a good chance. Then the other team.
Most likely that's what's going to happen. But I really, again, I'm pretty sure in other leagues, expansion teams have gotten the first pick. Correct?
In some years they didn't. I mean,
no, but I'm not talking the NHL. In some other leagues, I think doesn't Major League Baseball do it that way?
I don't know.
It's been a long time. I think they do.
I mean, wasn't San Jose an expansion team in the Lindros draft? Didn't they? I believe that was their first year. And Pat Falloon, he was picked 2nd.
Yeah.
It was not the number one. It was not the number 1 pick because Quebec was an existing franchise, and they picked Lindros. But as
a result, it wasn't their franchise player, and that's really my point.
Right. right in between because they missed out on Lindros at 1 and Niedermeyer at 3, and they picked.
Right.
Well, they're stupid that they picked Pat Falloon. I mean,
I know, I get it, but my point is, give him the number 1, and then you've given him every opportunity. That's just me.
Yeah. All right, just quickly here, games for tonight that with playoff implications. Minnesota at New Jersey. I believe Keith Kincaid is still in goal for them.
That's a tough game for Minnesota. That's one where, boy, that could blow up in their face.
Zach Parise going back to New Jersey.
Yeah.
Carolina, who has remained playing tough even after trading Eric Stahl, goes into Penguins. So Jordan Stahl returns to Pittsburgh.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
Detroit Columbus. That's a rivalry from the old division, from the old Central Division. That'll be tough. Florida at Toronto. Florida's in a battle for first place right now.
Yeah.
With they're in the lead, 1 point over Boston, 2 points over Tampa. Toronto is playing out the string.
Have everything to lose for.
Yes, Toronto, exactly. Leo Komarov is not in the lineup, and Connor Brown makes his NHL debut tonight.
Interesting to see how he does.
Yeah, and one nice story that I like. His favorite player apparently was Darcy Tucker, who was one of my favorite players to watch.
One of the dirtiest players of all time.
One of the dirtiest players of all time, but he was fun to watch.
He had some skill, though. I got to be fair. He did.
Yes. And Connor Brown apparently wore number 16 when he was a young kid all the time. He wore 61 in with the Marlies, and he was given number 16 for the Leafs. So
he's smaller than Darcy Tucker, though.
He takes over number 16 from Nick Spaulding.
Smaller than Tucker, isn't he? Tucker was a bigger guy than him.
Not much.
Not much, but a little bit. But he's definitely a little bit bigger.
Tucker was maybe 5'11" and 190 pounds.
I don't think Connor Brown's 5'11".
He might be. I'm not sure. Islanders and Nashville, two teams struggling for position in their respective divisions. Tampa Bay at Dallas. Tampa Bay did not look good in Toronto, and probably.
No, that's a tough game for them too against Dallas. I mean,
yeah. San Jose at Arizona, and New York at second of back-to-back. Well, what a back-to-back! Anaheim and then L.A. If they win this one, Russ, you may have to recant your criticisms and your doubts about the Rangers, because you go two for two in Anaheim and L.A. That says something.
It does say something. We'll see. I'm not ready to go all crazy with that yet, one way or the other. There's still a lot of hockey to be played. Connor Brown is listed at 5'11", but I've stood next to him. He ain't 5'11".
Yeah, and we have to mention that Brendan Morrow signed a one-day contract with the Dallas Stars and retired. Good NHL career, won a Stanley Cup with the Stars.
Played in two, played with Tampa also.
Captain,
a very tough guy, a real heart and soul guy, but like a guy that really gave it all to the game. In 2000, I remember I went to a game. It was like the first time I'd ever been to the Stanley Cup. I actually got invited to play golf and go to the Stanley Cup with the NHL. And so I did, right? I got to play on this amazing golf course, and then I go to the Stanley Cup, and Brendan Morrow played with a broken bone in his ankle.
Yeah, I think he was 19 years old or 20 years old when they won the Cup in '99. He was the kid. It was all the veterans, the Newendykes, the Carbonos, oh God, who was the Darian Hatcher, the Craig Ludwig. You know, it was a very veteran team, and he was the one kid. So
Daryl Sador, guys like that.
Yeah, exactly. All right, Russ, great show. We will be back tomorrow with another edition of the Hockey Buzzcast. Thanks for watching, and remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey.